What causes people to respond to culture mixing in an exclusionary or integrated fashion? Let us now review the factors that determine people's evaluative responses to culture mixing. Focusing first on the exclusionary reactions, they are more likely to emerge when people feel the need to defend the integrity and vitality of the heritage culture. This occurs when people perceive that a foreign symbol intrudes in a sacred cultural space and threatens the integrity and vitality of the heritage culture. For instance, when Starbucks, an American symbol of cosmopolitanism and upscale consumption, opened a store in the Forbidden City, the historical palace of Chinese emperors, there was a very strong negative response among Chinese consumers who perceived that Starbucks had gone too far as to threaten the essence of Chinese culture. This occurred in spite of Starbucks' success in China, and the fact that Starbucks stores are commonly found in shopping areas close by to the Forbidden City. This visceral negative reaction to the Forbidden City store is explained by perceptions of cultural contamination triggered by culture mixing, something absent in other stores in shopping areas that lack cultural significance for the Chinese. Another factor that accentuates exclusionary responses to culture mixing is the level of identification with the heritage culture. Coming back to the Starbucks store in the Forbidden City example, it is very likely that consumers who reacted more negatively and were hence more vocal were those that were highly identified with Chinese culture, or those that were more patriotic in terms of their understanding of their Chinese identity. These consumers were more likely to perceive Starbucks as a threat to the essence of Chinese culture embodied by the Forbidden City. Another driver of exclusionary responses is the salience of intercultural competition. For instance, during sport competitions like the Olympics, people become more aware of the salience of intercultural rivalries, like the China-US rivalry, and hence more likely to respond negatively to foreign symbols that can be perceived as cultural contaminants. This was demonstrated in Chinese consumers' attitudes toward foreign brands during the Beijing Olympics, a time in which the China-US rivalry for the dominance of gold medals was highly salient in consumers' minds. Finally, exclusionary responses are also likely to emerge when people have a culture defense mindset that motivates them to keep the culture unspoiled. A culture defense mindset can be triggered by reminders of one's mortality, as when terrorism threats are salient. For example, after the September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States, American consumers became more wary of foreigners and foreign influences. Let us now focus on the drivers of integrative responses. One first factor that promotes such responses is the thoughtful elaboration about cultural complexities. People spontaneously inclined or prompted to reflect about the complexities of cultural interrelationships are less likely to experience exclusionary responses and to instead appreciate the novelty of culture-mixed stimuli. Having a multicultural experience from being bicultural, extensive travel abroad, or simply the cultural curiosity to learn about other cultures can also attenuate the negative exclusionary responses to culture mixing and promote instead a creative mindset to appreciate the novelty of culture-mixed stimuli. Finally, identification with the values of the mixed cultures, and particularly so with those of the foreign culture, can also foster integrative responses to culture mixing. For instance, in the past example of a ramen noodle burger, a Japanese identified with an American lifestyle might appreciate the novelty of this burger and get to like it. Exclusionary reactions to culture mixing are fostered by the need to defend the integrity and vitality of the heritage culture, identification with the heritage culture, the salience of intergroup competition, and the salience of a culture defense mindset. Finally, integrated responses to culture mixing are accentuated by thoughtful elaboration about cultural complexities, multicultural experience, and identification with the values of the mixed cultures.